sites. Right now on the site, we have, like I mentioned, a lot of S9s running. Previously, kind of going into the Brains OS thing, we were running ASICseer, which I've been using for about, I would say we've been using it for about 6 months, actually 4 months on the software, for that ASICseer software. And then recently, because of actually my podcast appearance, we were asked to
this podcast appearance
today. Yes, we were asked to basically remove that software from the miners because we were not hashing at their appropriate rate, according to ASICseer, and it was not high enough hash rate per watts per terahash. The machines weren't all running. Of course, these are machines that have been running for 4 years now, have been in the ecosystem for a long time. And also, they're not our highest priority. As you mentioned, we are working on things that are, trying to change this fundamental beliefs of money and the core system. So we had to move off of that operating system. We were basically forced to either to make a decision, either come on the podcast or don't. If you come on the podcast, we're going to kick you off this. All your miners will stop working. And if you don't go on the podcast, well, we'll give you a discount on your fees. And that really didn't sit well for me, especially as I mentioned earlier, owning my data.
let me get this straight. This podcast that we're talking about right now, was being held over your head as like extortion to, like, if you go on this podcast, you will lose business with us, basically.
Yeah, basically, and not only lose business, but I will have to spend my tech time, my time resolving the issue. And what I kind of said was that I was like, I don't appreciate you questioning my calendar. Like, this is just coming in and saying, hey, you can't get in this meeting. Like, you can't have this meeting with this person unless we're going to cut you off completely. And that was hard because for my relationship with ASICseer, I was one of the first users of FOS, which was the software before. I had a 300 GPU mining facility back in, when they launched in 2016 with Ethereum. And so to see that, like, hey, I can't even use your software anymore, you just have to be kind of like ripped out, was very hard for me, as I mentioned, because I like, data privacy. I like my own software. So I'm glad the community was able to help out, though. Scott, was great. He was able to help motivate some people and just let them know about the story. And then they came and they were able to help upgrade some of the machines to newer software. Of course, they're not going to be running until the end, after the halving, 15 days from now. But, they need to make that money for the next 15 days, especially for majority of the miners are ourselves. But we have a small, about maybe 5%, 10% of those machines running for customers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing your story about that. Just a little bit of background. The reason for this, the reason why he received that threat was because I had said something negative about ASICseer that the owner of ASICseer felt was not true. And I had an inkling that.
Is it really negative, though, Scott? Is it really negative if you are just literally like reporting information that someone else has told you?
Right. Yeah. So I had reiterated something that somebody had told me about ASICseer, and that got the owner pretty upset. And it's kind of started this little battle. So now, as of yesterday, April 27th, on their website, they have this disclaimer saying, kind of like a terms of service saying, if you associate with certain types of people, if you are a scammer, or if you run a Ponzi scheme, whatever, all these different guidelines saying that if we feel that we don't want to work with you anymore, we're going to not work with you. And the interesting thing is, okay, they have some protections built in. One of them being that they're technically not cutting you off themselves, right? So they say. They say that they are going to stop accepting your fees. So they're going to stop taking their cut from the dev fee that is on those machines. And because they're going to refuse taking your money, that's going to activate some sort of a kill switch or
that will stop your hashing.
Right. So to me, I don't know, that just brings up this really interesting concept that I don't know if a lot of miners are thinking about, being that, I think JP, you said it earlier, not your firmware, not your miners, right? So it just kind of brings up this whole new thing that we have to think about. So if we're going to be installing third-party software, what are some of these kind of concerns that we have to be looking at?
Yeah, absolutely, JP. I mean, you brought in the whole fact that, Bitcoin was emotionless. It took out the human equation, right? So should we now welcome back in a human equation into an industry that's trying to free us from that?
Wow, that's big. I mean, I think with mining at the end of the day, every business has that human equation, but with mining, it can be potentially removed. Like there's a lot of things that can be done with machines. And really at the end of the day, the way I view mining is just as an interest tool and a great debt-based investment. So it is hard though, when you have, miners running software and you're trusting the developer, they're providing you a good service. But then something like, in my opinion, a political debate, this debate that's happening. And I actually, was funny because I saw the debate. I saw Scott's comments earlier in a private group chat regarding firmware and regarding this. And I specifically told myself, I do not want to get involved with this. I don't have time for this. And the next thing you know, a week later, I have emails and stuff. I'm like, oh, this is great. I love it. Like the universe knew I had to be in this. So I was not, yeah.
Yeah. So that it's an interesting concept. You have these ASIC mining manufacturers that have their firmware. And, when you buy the miner, it comes with this firmware on it, and you just connect it to the pool, and you can start making Bitcoin, right? And each of these miners might have a slightly different version of that firmware on their ASICs. But a lot of them are based on, well, most of them, or maybe not all of them, except for Brains, are built on CG miner. Okay. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you have these different things. A year ago or so, there was the concern about ant bleed, where Bitmain potentially could, if they wanted to, they could shut off all the miners in the world or select miners that are mining, which brought up the question, well, what if the Chinese government is involved with Bitmain? What if China wanted to kind of take over the cryptocurrency and cause a problem? China could force Bitmain to do something like that, or Bitmain could just choose to do it kind of underhandedly without anybody realizing what's happening. And that just kind of brought up the whole question to me about firmware and about open source and about mining, and how easily or how difficult it might be to prevent somebody from doing this.